Yes, the Saharan dust finally made it after a 2-week transit across the Atlantic. Welcome to Meteorology Lab. This is the bird's eye view showing a few towers out to the south there, and you can see that this dust has kind of a milky white look, and you have to keep in mind that a lot of the heavier particles have fallen out over the past 2 weeks, and we're left with the very fine microscopic particles, and that's what we see out there right now. Here's the surface chart. This is from the Weather Prediction Center, the frontal locations. And if we look at the actual plots, this correlates pretty well to what we see on our digital atmosphere chart, but this is actually wrong, these locations. What we actually need to do is take a look at the data itself, and we see a much different picture when we just bring up the data plots like this. For example, look at all of southeast Texas. Temperatures are well up in the 90s. Got 94 there at Waco, and 92 Houston, 91 at Shreveport. But if you look up to the north, 80. That's going to be Sweetwater, no, Big Spring. No, not Big Spring. Can't remember the name of that town. 83 at Childress, 78 at Elk City, and 74 at Oklahoma City. So this is actually a pretty substantially large cold air mass working up to the north. And if we actually put the fronts in, we're going to be looking at a alignment, something like that right there. So even though that this air mass here is mostly outflow, it is going to behave like a front, especially when it covers this large of a scale. So if I was going to analyze the charts here, I would definitely go with something like that. That's going to be more relevant to your surface analysis, and that's going to shape the patterns that we have tomorrow morning as it moves north in the deep southerly flow coming up from the Gulf. Any other boundaries up to the north? Let's take a look. Well, we can find the meso-high for sure. A good technique for that is to find the coldest temperatures, and they're 70 degrees up there north of Russell up to Concordia. And yeah, that's going to correspond to some of the highest pressures right there. That's the meso-high from a rather active area of showers and thunderstorms up there in Kansas. And we also have upslope flow in place, east, southeast, and west, northwest right there. And what that does when you have upslope flow like that, you remember we've been talking a lot about downslope flow. And an example of that, once I find my charts, yeah, downslope flow. Okay, yeah, here we go. Remember those temperatures that we've been seeing up there in the northern plains, and this is yesterday, and you can see that they had 108 up there at Williston, North Dakota. So downslope flow gives you adiabatic warming. You have drier parcels and a clearing trend. Now the opposite happens when you have upslope flow. So we're going from about 1,000 to 2,000 MSL all the way up to 5,000. And what this does is it tends to humidify the air mass, and it tends to produce cooling. You get adiabatic cooling as it ascends. So that cooling is not really all that substantial, but it does knock a few degrees off of what we usually see there in Colorado. All right, let's go into the rest of the charts. Yeah, might as well look at NHC there. Looks pretty clear out there in the Atlantic. Anything coming up? Not really, just one outgoing system. And we'll check out the eastern North Pacific. A little more active out there, and we keep an eye on these systems as they get further to the west, because those can have impacts on Hawaii. It's a little bit further out to the west there. So let's see, that's pretty much it right there. Sea surface temperatures, I did remember to bring this chart up, and they are warming up a little bit. These temperatures are about neutral to maybe just slightly warm. But like we saw yesterday, it's been pretty quiet out there from the Cape Verde Islands to the Windward Islands there. All right. Another interesting chart is going to be the temperature anomaly. This gives us an idea of where it's warm and where it's cold. That heat wave up there in Scandinavia and northern Europe has finally broke sometime last week, and temperatures are a little bit more seasonal in that area. You can see how cool things are in Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas with that cluster of storms and that upper level low, also some cool air up to the north in Canada. So right away we can see where we expect to find that front. So you can also see that S shape right there. So pretty much at the near the apex of that S, right in the middle of that S, that's going to be roughly where the cold front is, and then a little bit further up to the north near that cusp, that's going to be the baroclinic low. So it looks like that's just east of Winnipeg, moving to the Thunder Bay area and dragging some cold air right in behind. We can also see cold air up there in Fairbanks and the North Slope. They had that earthquake, I think that was yesterday. They had a magnitude, I think it was 6.5 way up there in the North Slope. I actually looked at the Fairbanks headlines, and they didn't even mention it, so I guess there wasn't really much impact from that. But right in there, I think I can pick out maybe a frontal system, and maybe a little bit of that downslope flow right in here, southern Yukon. Temperatures above normal right in there. So that's probably a little bit of southwesterly flow coming off the coastal range right there. Very hot in Greenland. That's not what we like to see. And anything else going on elsewhere? Not really. Okay. So that's a wrap-up of the world weather. And before we head into the bulk of the program, let me just check in on chat and see what's going on there. Pretty good crowd. When I fired up the stream, I only saw zero. I saw 0 people and no chat, so it looks like people piled in here pretty quickly, so that's good to see. Alexander Woods, Burl H., Shirley Keast, Sue M., David Lumbert, rained in Arkansas for 40 days and nights. Fun with Tech, Carl Berghoff, Ryan Toomies, Christian Flock, Alexander Woods, very dreary and cold. All right, very good. I did want to mention this came up in an email recently. If I don't mention your name, it's not intentional or anything like that. This program, believe it or not, behind the scenes, it's kind of chaotic, and I'm having to really keep things moving here, so things get kind of left by the wayside sometimes. But I do want to thank our Patreon donors. Let me just give you these names real quick. Our current Patreon donors: Alexi Walsh, Burl Henry, Edward Davies, John Buma, John Huntington, Joseph Grusing, Kevin McKinney, Michael O'Neill, Michelle Curlin, Paul Tukowski, and Robert Vermillion, Sarah Wood, Shirley Keast, Steve Witt, Thomas Fortner, and Trent Tubazuski. And if I missed your name, it either probably means that your Patreon pledge is not caught up. So you're welcome to take care of that any time. And let me just give you the quick address right there. Yeah, if you want to pick up your Patreon pledge, feel free to do so. And let's head back into the weather here. You can see a lot of the showers have moved to the north. So what's going on there? Remember, we were seeing a lot of activity in Texas there. A lot of that's kind of shut down, and we see heavier cells up in Oklahoma and Kansas. Well, there's a couple things going on. One is the precipitable water. That tends to control a lot of the weather patterns in August. So let's bring up the precipitable water. And we can see the higher values over 2 inches have definitely moved to the north. And we find that from DFW up to Kansas City and up to Topeka. So it's gradually lifting north, and we're going to see it probably moving up into Nebraska and Iowa tomorrow. So with that strong southerly flow, the moisture is on its way north. And then the other factor is the upper level low. See if we can find that there. This is the 500 millibar chart. And we can see right in here, that's approximately where the low is. Let me just go to the eastern Oklahoma Panhandle, and we'll look at the wind profile. So it'll take just a second to come up. And we can see in the upper levels, the winds are out of the south. So we know that because, you know, if you're standing with your back to the wind in the northern hemisphere, you're going to find the low pressure to your left. So we need to go west. So let's go to the western panhandle right here. We'll check out the wind profile, look in the upper troposphere, and it looks like it's kind of died down a bit. And then if we go out towards maybe Trinidad, Colorado, now we pick up a northerly flow out of the north at 30. So it appears that the center of the low is right there over, say, around Boise City, maybe up to Lamar, and that's going to gradually lift northward. Yeah, you can see it rotating right there. So that's going to move up towards the Russell and, yeah, the Russell area, Dodge City, and then up probably to around Omaha as it gets picked up by the westerly flow. So eventually this will make its way into the Midwest around Wednesday to Thursday, and we should see rain chances go up in this area here. All right, our other charts, thickness, this gives us our playbook of where the fronts are. Now, a lot of times people they look for the L's and H's on here. For example, you see a bunch of H's here, so that's suggesting high pressure right there. But people will sometimes get lost when they look in an area like this. See, there's no L. So you kind of have to use a little bit of common sense as you go through any machine-produced chart. So there's definitely a low right there. And if we kind of draw that in the troughs like that, that shows us that cold front that we talked about on that other temperature anomaly chart. So it shows up pretty well. Cold front coming into Minnesota, Duluth, coming through Aberdeen and Casper, Wyoming, and then the warm front approaching Moosonee, Ontario. So this is probably one of the very first good pushes of cold air coming out of Canada late this season. This is all cold air advection right there. And then we go up to the north and we find another front. Things are definitely picking up there in Yukon, Alaska, and Northwest Territories. So that's what I would go for as far as a frontal position up there. And remember that little speck of warm air in Yukon? That was in this area right here. And this is that downslope flow that they were getting on that in southeastern Alaska up to the coastal range in Yukon right there. So a little bit of a lee side effect going on right there. Alaska itself is in the bulk of the cold air. And let's see what else is going on. That's pretty much it. Down to the south in the U.S., really no air masses to talk about. Most of this is all just tropical. It's a bit of the Bermuda High. And then it looks like a pretty cool polar air mass coming onto the west coast right there. And that's starting to infiltrate the coastal regions. We'll see that on the satellite here in a little bit. We do know that cold front has gradually moved inland into the Pacific Northwest, and I guess we're finding that somewhere, maybe something like that. So it's moved into Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. This is probably a good time to go into the satellite. So there's the big picture. Put that into motion there. So we've got the dust, Saharan dust, moving into Texas right there. And if we look up to the north, smoke. So a lot of obscurations here and there around the country, and especially towards the end, you can see up there in the Great Lakes, you can see some of that smoke wrapping in. See, as the sun angles get kind of low, you can really pick that out right there, those striations. So a lot of smoke up there in the northern U.S., and some of it making it all the way down to Atlanta. All right, so weather-wise, what's going on? Looks like more monsoon storms in the Great Basin area, the Eastern Rockies, or the Western Rockies right there. And here's our low in the western panhandles. So down to the south of that low, looks like we got some dry air advection coming in the south side, and then moist air advection heading up into Kansas and Nebraska like that. Not much of a synoptic scale contrast as far as air masses, but in the mesoscale, you can definitely see the temperature difference. So let me clarify that a little bit. Let's go back to that thickness chart. See, we're looking at 1,000 through 500 millibar thickness. This is kind of like an average of the lowest 3 miles of the atmosphere. And if we look in Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, we don't find any signature of a strong front like we do up north. See, up to the north, very easy to find the fronts. Down to the south, can't really pick that out at all using the synoptic scale charts. But at the mesoscale, yeah, there's definitely an air mass contrast there. So you have to use all of your charts and look at all the scales to see what's going on. Back to satellite. Let's take a closer look at things. With that dry flow out there around Amarillo and Lubbock, looks like we're probably picking up some dust out there. That's either dust or smoke, one of the two. And which one it is, I'm not completely sure. I think due to the strong northerly flow right there, I think that may be some of that Canadian and West Coast smoke moving into the area there. But it is behaving a bit like a dry slot, and then over Kansas we can see the higher storm tops out around Dodge City. There they are right there. I do have the radar. And they don't look quite so great on the radar. So these are not very organized. They are certainly tropical. If we were going to look at soundings, we would find a lot of moisture throughout the column there. And we put that into motion right there. Looks like a very small MCS right there around, looks like around Pratt up to Russell. And then the stuff out further to the east, not very organized. A couple of stronger cells capable of producing heavy rain and maybe a little bit of small hail. And I don't think wind would really be too much of a factor if the sounding is humid all the way through. Basically, the more moisture you dump into the sounding through a considerable depth, that tends to reduce your threat from wind gusts there. Let's look elsewhere around the country. The Northeast, definitely getting some activity there. This is an outgoing wave showing early this morning around the New York City area. Back into the west, this may not really catch your eye, but if we bring this forward into the midday hours, you can see these towers going up around Pittsburgh, all the way down in Washington, D.C., and back across Charleston. This to me looks like a little bit of cold core convection. It's strongly diurnal. We can see the rotation of the wind field out in this area right here. And there's definitely an orographic component due to heating on the mountain slopes there, especially in the summer. That can be pretty strong, and we get rapid development, especially if the air mass is uncapped like what we have here. Florida also getting some thunderstorms, quite a bit of it, and these storms are pretty well ventilated. You can see they're propagating slightly to the north, but the anvils are being carried toward the southwest. So these are going to be some fairly strong storms there. Looks like Palm Beach, West Palm Beach and Miami are pretty much spared, but as you get towards Fort Myers up to Titusville, Orlando, they're getting quite a bit of activity there. And then looking out west, the Mogollon Rim, active once again. You can really see it here. Storms brewing south of Flagstaff, down along the rim, and they finally get going out around Prescott there. Also storms going up in the Sierra Nevada. See, obviously mountains are pretty favored in summer for convection. It's a good way to get lift there. And then out around the San Francisco and Monterey area, got that marine layer lurking out to the along the coastal regions right there. And part of that is due to the very hot temperatures. If we look at yesterday's temperatures, it's okay to look at yesterday's temperatures because at the synoptic scale, a lot of that flow is going to be driven by temperatures over the past couple days here. And we can see that yesterday it was very hot there in the San Joaquin Valley, 104 there at Bakersfield, 103 at Fresno, and you can see along the west coast right there, 62 for a high at Arcata. Very cool polar air along the coast right there. So that actually gives us a thermal circulation. All that cold air lurking off the coast right there, and when we get that heating inland, that gives us a circulation. It pulls the air inland, and then it rises, and we get a pretty pronounced sea breeze there. So what we're seeing is a lot of that air trying to come inland. So let me move this up here, and you can see that going on. Looks like San Francisco cloudy, clouds in Monterey. And I saw in the last few frames it looks like they were trying to surge inland a little bit there. These do tend to surge inland during the nighttime hours, and they get kind of beaten back during the midday hours. Okay, time to look at the forecast. Let's check out our home country, home state here. No, I don't think we're quite seceded yet, but yeah, home turf, that's what I'm looking for. Storms up in the Ardmore area to McAllister. Texas is finally drying off a little bit. A couple weak cells early tomorrow morning around DFW. Other than that, pretty quiet. We'll look at the prevailing flow. Just go ahead and animate that there. Yeah, there's that very strong low there in New York that moves offshore and carries the cold core storms with it. And then here comes round 2 coming into the Midwest for Wednesday and Thursday. And then after that, let's see what we're looking at for late in the week. Looks like that subtropical ridge building in. So more warm weather for the northern plains right there. However, pretty good system coming onto the central west coast there, Oregon and Northern California. So looks like another front coming in for Thursday. That's obviously going to go up to the northeast and probably not going to get much relief in the Rockies from that. Okay, for the long term, let's see, what do we got here? I guess we can look at the GFS. We'll look at the rainfall and pressure. So starting out, this is the current time. There's that big Canadian front right there. The tail end in California looks like that's kind of fizzled out. I would expect to find it in that area. Looks like it's mostly gone there. And let's go into tomorrow. For tomorrow evening, looks like some of that rain moving into the Kansas City, Omaha area with that upper level low. Canadian high shifts into Ontario, and we get kind of this feed of cold air coming from the Great Lakes into the Midwest. So I would expect to find a little bit of a warm front, kind of like that right there. For Thursday, or for Wednesday, that's going to be kind of a transition right there, just rain moving eastward from Nebraska into Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. And let's see how things look for Friday. Looks like this time New York, as the low continues moving to the east there. Looks like kind of a backdoor front there in Kansas, Missouri, fed by this ridge. See, this is a big long ridge coming from the Hudson Bay region, so that's a lot of cool air coming southward right there. Things do gear up there in western Canada. That's going to be the next big change, and there it comes for Monday. And this looks to be pretty strong there. That's going to punch into the Central Plains around Monday. And this is very extensive, all the way from Oregon to Manitoba. This is all cold air. So that's going to be coming south and bringing up the precip chances. And then that makes it all the way into Texas around Tuesday. I'm not sure I've ever seen anything this strong. Well, yeah, actually this has happened in August. It's not very common. Typically we're under the influence of the Bermuda High, and the maps look a little bit more like that. So certainly next week is going to be interesting. It's going to be dominated by this Canadian high coming in. And the high itself looks like it moves all the way into Texas for Tuesday and Wednesday. That's a pretty good push of cold air. So we're going to be drying off pretty much everywhere for Wednesday and Thursday next week. And then I think we were looking at round 2. Yep, there it is coming together for the weekend, 25th, 26th. And this appears to be a little bit weaker. It's going to affect mostly the Great Lakes region. And yeah, here's round number 3. This looks stronger. Once again, big high covering everywhere from Oregon to Manitoba. This is on the 28th. And that should sweep southward and give us kind of a cool final couple weeks there for August. All right, let's see. That's about all I got here. Take a quick look at chat there, get caught up. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to read all the chat there, but I do appreciate the comments. Ryan Toomey is reporting Florida Straits humid and wet. Carl Berghoff mentioning it was muggy there. Not a single shower. The cap is quite strong under the ridge. Major backup delays with flights. Yeah, let's see whose flights are delayed. There's a FAA delays page that's interesting to look at sometimes. Fly.faa.gov, and we can see in the Northeast they're the ones that are getting hammered there, all the way from Dulles, Washington National, all the way up to Boston. I don't know. Why don't we check out the flights? Look at the flight tracks and see if anybody's stuck in holding patterns. Let me get this centered. So, you know, based off of everything that we've talked about over the past 30 minutes, we know that it's due to thunderstorms with that large low there. Okay, let me see if I can break out this window. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, there's Philadelphia right there. This shows all the blue and green. These are the arrivals and departures there at Philadelphia. And I don't see any like holding stacks there. But a lot of these flights are definitely cutting through some cells. Let me just check one more here. Yeah, Philadelphia's, that was a good pick there. They're most impacted. Delays 46 minutes to an hour. So, yeah, you got to be careful taking these flights in when you've got these upper level lows. In fact, let me bring that up there. Okay, that's going to be current. So there's Philadelphia right there. There's the big upper level low. And anywhere near that, you're going to have the instability close to the low, and you're going to have shear around the periphery of that low in here, because you can see that the contours are kind of close together through this area. So that means the upper level winds are going to be kind of strong, and due to that, we get better shearing of the storms right in that area. All right, that's all I've got for tonight. I appreciate y'all watching, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a good evening.